Hello and welcome to the Audio Epics podcast. I feel like I always sound exactly the same when I say that opening line. But here we are with a new episode. It's been a while, hasn't it? Well, we promised a while ago that we would be releasing these storytelling podcast episodes in which Eline and I talk about various aspects of storytelling. And now finally, we're ready to present our first one, and I hope you will enjoy it. It's just me and my wife talking about some aspects of storytelling, particularly when it pertains to fantasy. And just sharing our ideas and our views, and also trying to sort of relate it to our own audio epic stories. Just two people with a certain take on things, just sharing that. And you might agree, you might disagree. And we'd be very interested either way in what you think. We call ourselves audio epics, so obviously we're interested in epic storytelling. And recently, a sort of realization came to me that to have an epic story, the feel of an epic story, you don't really need for it to be super, super long. This is something that came to me when I reread The Hobbit recently. It's not a very long book. It's about 300 something pages. And when I came to the end of it, I had this feeling of, wow, I've really gone on this big journey with Bilbo. You really have this feel that, he started out as this little hobbit.
Yeah, right.
I mean, very, very, homely and comfortable. And then he goes through this massive, life-changing, character-changing journey, sees all these different places, gets involved in a war, and at the end it's like, whew, wow, we've been through a lot together. And that's the epic feel, I think. Similarly, I think something similar happens in the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, Tolkien's good friend. These stories, they're very short. They're very short books. You can read them in an afternoon, maybe.
Yeah.
But so much happens in them. And you go along this ride full of, strange creatures and countries and kings and princesses. And it feels epic. And
it doesn't feel like it drags.
Exactly.
In any way. It's also because every story is a separate story. It always has a sense of conclusion, even though it's a very long series. I have a similar experience, by the way, with while I was listening to Dane Russell Leonardson's Ancestry, which was actually a very short audiobook, audio drama actually. But I felt like I had read this 1,000-page long book afterwards. That was amazing. Yeah. That was really an eye-opener that you can actually make a very epic story in a short time and make it feel like that too.
Yeah, that's actually a good segue into this next bit. I know that Dane is a very big fan of Brandon Sanderson, the epic fantasy writer. And when you listen to Ancestry, you can definitely feel that there's a Brandon Sanderson vibe to it. He's got similar sort of world building and characterizations. But what I like actually is in Ancestry, Dane managed to convey that in a mere 2.5 hours, where Sanderson takes thousands and thousands of pages to do that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed Brandon Sanderson's books as well. I started reading The Way of Kings back shortly after it came out. I thought it was an amazing book at the time. I really loved the epic world-building feel of it all. And I also enjoyed the next one, but very much. But by the time I came to the third one, a certain sense of fatigue set in, because I knew, okay, so we're at page 3000 or something. now, and we know that there's going to be at least 2 more volumes to conclude this story, and in the meantime, there were all these long scenes of, when not much happens. That it's sort of just little scenes that sort of sketch a character, sort of flesh out a character, but that don't really contribute to the main plot.
Yeah, I get it. I love Sanderson, but the only thing I ever finished from him was the YA trilogy, Reckoners.
Right.
Which was
the superhero
awesome,
story.
Actually, yeah, it was YA, but it was different in a way because it was about superheroes. I really enjoyed it, but the other epic Brandon Sanderson volumes, I just couldn't finish them. Also because I heard it was the Way of Kings. I thought it was an awesome beginning. I really wanted to know the ending, but when you hear it's at least 5 volumes. Nowadays, there's so little time for good entertainment, and you're not quite sure whether he will make whether he will make it worthwhile. Yeah. I think
it demands so much attention from you, the reader, that what story really warrants that? I mean,
exactly.
How can you justify that to the reader? I think that's hard. The same thing happened with Robert Jordan. I think that's the extreme example. The Wheel of Time, which is 14 volumes, and each book is at least 800 pages. So it's ridiculously long, and it's one big story with the same set of characters taking place over, I don't know.
Most fans say it drags in the middle, right?
Yeah, not surprisingly. I mean, it's just, I love the epic feel, but there comes a point when it just becomes, when there's just too much stuff.
Annoying.
Yeah, well, it's not annoying because it's too epic. It's annoying precisely because it's so long, the epicness sort of is lost, I think. Because there are so many scenes of people just sitting in a room and talking about politics, that the epic feel sort of gets lost in that.
Right. I think there's a good reason why a lot of epic fantasy stories are trilogies. A book, an epic book series. I think a trilogy always works. You have other examples, of course. You have Harry Potter, but still each separate book is also a separate story. It concludes. Yeah, and that's a difference.
I think J.K. Rowling sort of followed C.S. Lewis's example there with the 7 books, and each book is its own story, but there's also an overarching narrative there, but it's kind of invisible until you get to the end.
Right, and you also have this great build-up from this little boy who becomes a man, and each story gets more dark. And
each story is its own story, but together they are the story of Harry Potter.
Right.
At the same way in Narnia, each story is its own story, but together it's the history of Narnia.
And that's why nobody was apparently interested in the sequel to Harry Potter, which was actually just part 1 of some play, some script.
Yeah. Well, there's the Fantastic Beasts series now, which seems to be relatively successful.
That's another thing. I think it's interesting to have a trilogy, and then you can still go nuts with
spin-offs.
Spin-offs, yeah, of course. Why not? But it's a kind of modesty, I think, from an author to write just a trilogy, and then preferably that the first part is just a separate story that has a conclusion to it, because then that way I think the audience decides for itself whether they want to spend lots of hours of their life invested in your story. So if you just have a trilogy and you have a separate first story, you don't oblige people to stay invested. If they just say, after one book, I'm done. It was nice, but I quit here. Then you kind of
I've had that
choice.
experience many times. I've had that experience many times that I really enjoy the first book, but then I feel like, okay, but that's enough for me. And then when you feel like there are so many unanswered questions,
right?
Yeah, that's less enjoyable then.
I really like it if an author gives you the choice. Here is a book, and there's more if you want, but if you don't want it, that's fine too.
Yeah.
If you write this epic series and you say it's gonna be 14 books, but it's gonna be so worth it because I believe in it.
Yeah, I know it. Yeah, that's true.
And you have to put every other book you ever wanted to read, just put it away for some time because here's my next book. There is so much stuff to read.
Exactly.
I don't think any author can ask of that kind of investment.
I know there are people who read voraciously and who read very quickly, and for them it's less of an issue. But for me, I'm not that fast of a reader.
Me neither.
Because I have this tendency with every sentence that I read, I think about it, and I try to imagine exactly what the author is trying to describe here, and I always take a lot of time.
I never get fans invested in a very long series, and I really want to know at what point the series is going to end. I really want to know beforehand how many books are there.
Yes.
When is it going to be finished? And does the author know where his story ends?
Yes.
And does he have an idea what the ending is going to be? Because if they keep dragging along and they have no idea themselves what their story is going to end, then there's a very fair chance you're going to be
I kind of feel
disappointed.
sorry for fans of George R.R. Martin's series Song of Ice and Fire, because right now it looks like he's not going to get finished with this. And if you've invested in this series, if you started reading it all these years ago, because the first book came out in 1995, it's so disappointing if you don't even get to the end. I do have to say, I don't want to give the impression that we don't like long stories. I, for one, do like long stories. I'm a huge Tolkien fan, and when he said that with The Lord of the Rings, his intention was just to write a stupendously long story. Now, by the standards of 1955, it is a stupendously long story. But by today's epic fantasy standards, it's actually not very long. I think Lord of the Rings is the perfect length. And if you go much over that, you start getting into trouble. I don't know, it's a theory, I don't know if that's correct. But the problem that I see is not just that stories become too long and therefore, they start to drag a bit. There are all kinds of narrative problems that creep up.
Yeah, like too many characters to get invested in, too many plot lines that you all have to resolve in a way.
Yeah.
Which was not the case in Lost, for example.
Yeah, how can you resolve all of those plot lines?
Yeah, that became a very big disappointment. I remember watching the first episode of Lost, and I absolutely loved it. I loved the characters. Mm-hmm. And then in the second season, there was this bunch of other characters that were added. And then it kind of went in all kinds of directions. There were very promising plot lines that were just cut in midair. They did nothing with it anymore. And then characters becoming evil and becoming good again and dying and resurrecting again. And it was just one big mess.
Now, Lost is an extreme example of that, I guess. You have character arcs in storytelling, right? Like, I like the way they handled, for example, if you look at Star Wars, the original trilogy, you take the character of Han Solo, he's got this character arc. He starts out as this selfish sort of scoundrel, and then he learns to care about others, and in the end, he becomes a real hero. And that's a nice character arc over 3 movies. Now, when they started making the sequels, with The Force Awakens, etc., you have a problem. Where are you going to take Han Solo next? And so what they did, they just reset the whole character and brought him back to being a scoundrel.
Oh, I hate when they do that.
That to me is very disappointing. So what's the point of the story? You know,
They often do that, especially American series suffer from that they use these lame devices. For example, in Smallville, which was an awesome series, I thought, which tells the story about the birth of Superman and then his journey towards the moment he becomes Superman, with the suit and all, and you really look forward to that. And they could have done it in a couple of seasons, but they really drag it along, and it gives all these kind of narrative problems. For example, when you think Jonathan dies, you think this is the moment, and you're invested in that, and you're sad. And then it turns out he didn't die. This was not the moment, and then they pick another moment when he actually does die, and you don't care anymore.
Yeah,
because you were invested in the first moment. Also, there are all these kind of characters from Krypton. They come down on planet Earth, and they can suddenly manage all these powers, while Superman has actually he needed a lot of time to control them. And it kind of
ultimately makes Superman feel like the sort of pathetic.
Yeah, the one who needed a lot of.
Yeah, so the least capable guy from Krypton in a way.
It feels like they sent the loser to Earth to be Superman.
Yeah,
from zero to hero.
I guess like that's a narrative arc in its own way, but yeah. I know what you mean.
And they had this entire Lana build-up, but eventually he's going to end up with Lois Lane. And it takes such a long way. Every time you think, oh, this is an iconic moment I recognize from the story because you know the lore, then they take it away again because otherwise you would move on too fast. And I don't think that's a bad thing.
I guess in Smallville, the big build-up, what the whole series was building up to was the moment when you see Clark Kent in his Superman outfit.
Yeah, flying through the sky.
That's what you want to see, but they took 10 seasons to do that.
Yeah, which was way too long.
No kind of payoff is worth that kind of build-up.
But still, you keep watching because you really want to see that moment. You want that payoff, right?
Exactly.
And you turn out a bit disappointed in the end.
Yeah, I guess it's...
Oh, wow, I've had this big epic moment now, and he's in his suit and he flies through the sky and end credits.
And the whole series I remember when I saw that and I got this sinking feeling of why did I spend so many hours on this?
For this 1 second of... flying through the sky.
I felt a bit conned, really. I mean, sorry for Smallville fans, but that's my experience with that particular series.
I still enjoyed the series. It's just, afterwards you kind of feel conned indeed in a way, because they kind of take advantage of the fact that you really want to see that ending. Yeah,
and to me, I guess, to come full circle, when I reread The Hobbit and the Narnia books, I had this almost like an epiphany that everything's here. Everything you would want from a story is here, and it doesn't need thousands of pages. I mean, you could have a story in 1,000 pages and have it be amazing, obviously.
Sure.
But it's not necessary to get the epic feel for it to be extremely ridiculously long. And I guess that there is such a thing as a story becoming too long for its own good.
I always admire people who want to read entire fantasy series that are super long, but when I see something is more than a trilogy, I don't start.
Well, for me, a good example of one that really did work for me was Raymond E. Feist's series, the Rift War saga. The first book, Magician, is one book, and it feels very epic. I know that afterwards he continued trilogy after trilogy, all within this same world, but not necessarily about the same main characters. But I think that works because at any point you can quit reading and you don't feel like, oh, what was the point of it all?
Right.
You've had these completed stories that were all good. And when you have something like The Wheel of Time, where each book builds on the one before it and continues the story and it's supposed to, the big questions still aren't answered until at the very end, then you get tired. You just get very, very tired.
Yeah, I admire people who have finished the series. I just couldn't do that.
No, I couldn't anymore either. I quit Wheel of Time somewhere in book 5, which I thought that was quite an achievement for me. I mean, and then there are people who get all the way to book 14. Really, that's
Wow.
amazing. But I don't have that kind of patience. And so, in our own stories, we don't want to demand that kind of patience from our listeners either. So, with Witch Hunter, I hope people had a sort of feeling of, okay, this was a good story and it's completed, and I enjoyed it, but I would like another one. And so what I hope to do with Word of Wolfen is do that again. Have it be a good epic story in its own right, and then you can be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
And if you want, there's more.
With some kind of conclusion.
Yeah.
Too, yeah, and then make it into maximum a trilogy.
Yeah, and I really wouldn't take it beyond that. I mean, there could be more spin-offs like Beast of the Western Wilds, because I think that's different. It's more like, I guess we could talk about the X-Files.
Yeah.
You had the episodes that were just about there's this strange creature, let's find out what it is.
Yeah, the Monster of the Week episodes.
Yeah, and those were always my favorites.
Yeah, and then you had the anthology episodes, which were more like the big story arc.
Right.
And about the tension between the friendship between
yeah.
Scully
And to me, those mythology episodes always felt less satisfying because they always left you with lots and lots of questions.
True. It was also a very long series as well. Yeah.
And
was it 9 seasons?
I don't know. I don't remember. It was a lot.
We finished it. Right?
We did. Yeah, we actually did finish
at some point.
X-Files. But the Monster of the Week episode, you could have as many of them as you want. There's no problem, because you don't really have a narrative arc with Mulder and Scully there.
Right.
They're always the same. You like them that way. You don't want them to change. You don't need them to change.
And that's kind of the idea. An inspiration for future Witch Hunter stories. That the Beast of the Western Wilds might be a kind of horror episode. What they did in the X-Files was they had all these kind of genres that they put into the Monster of the Week episode. You had the horror episode, you had a romantic episode, you had a nostalgic episode, you even had a comedy episode, and then
a romantic episode,
more meta episode.
Right, the postmodern episode. Yeah,
postmodern
there were
episode.
a few of those.
So you had all kinds of different, very, very different episodes. Sometimes even inspired by an old movie or an entire subgenre.
Now, as for Witch Hunter, I would always keep it within the same genre.
Yeah, of course.
But there might be all kinds of different places that Ludlov goes to. Mm-hmm. To me, I'm very much inspired by places and atmospheres. So that we had this forest adventure with the beast. There could be more of a dungeon adventure or a city adventure or, I don't know, a winter episode.
We've had our share of forests, didn't we?
Yeah, we like forests. So, Eline is working on an audio drama script right now. It's almost finished. I know I've been saying this for months, but it actually has been almost finished for months. But
it's because I'm an awful perfectionist. And
it's also because our lives are very busy.
I always say it's not finished, and Domien says, "Yeah, it is."
But I don't know about that. I haven't read it yet. So. But anyway, it really is nearly finished, the script, and it takes place in a forest, just like Will of the Woods took place in a forest. And Beast of Western Wilds took place in a forest. And we like forests.
Yeah, because
forests are cool.
Forests are cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main reason.
Yeah. But yeah, there will be more forests in the future, no doubt. Part of that...
People annoyed by forests, they will be disappointed.
Yeah, I'm afraid so.
Yeah.
Part of that is, I think, in audio, the woods are a very cool place to set an audio drama in. There are all these sounds, The woods are full of subtle little sounds in the background. I really like that.
Yeah, but there will be different woods, right?
Yeah, and at one point, this is something for Ludlov maybe. I'd like to have a seafaring adventure also, something piratey. You could put Ludlov in a piratey context.
Yeah, we've
sort of Treasure
been
Island.
Brainstorming about a couple of spin-offs still. Yeah.
Who knows? But first, I want to sort of continue the main arc of Ludlov's character, and I do have an end point for him in sight. I do know where it's supposed to go. So, yeah. Is there anything more you would like to say about storytelling and lengths of episodes?
Well, maybe that we don't want to have a very, very long first episode of our storytelling podcast. Maybe.
It's 30 minutes. I think it's just right.
All right, then let's not drag it for our listeners.
Okay. That was our episode for today. So before you go, and before I go, I'd like to know, what do you think? Do you agree or disagree with what we've been saying? What do you think are some examples of long stories done well, or long stories done not so well? We're interested in your opinion in the comment section of our YouTube video, or on our podcasts. Or you can email us. We're interested in what you have to say. And also, do you like this storytelling podcast concept of ours? Tell us what you think. And then, all I can say now is, this is Domien, signing off.